Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Functional Physique podcast. This is episode 2 with Nathan Bevan. He is one part of AN education and coaching. Nathan, thanks very much for coming on. If you want to just introduce yourself a wee bit and give us a wee bit of background.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. It's a pleasure to come on the podcast. So a bit about myself. I'll keep it short. So I've been a coach for 12 years, started gym floor, went more into online coaching as COVID hit. I got interested in functional health because I have my own functional health issues. I'm a type 1 diabetic. No, I'm a type 2 diabetic, sorry. So I'm diet controlled diabetic. I have a rare type of diabetes. It's called glucokinase deficiency. Basically, I have a defected glucokinase gene, which means that my fasted blood glucose is higher than the average Joe's. So a healthy individual's fasted blood glucose probably be under 5. Mine is around about 7, and that's normal for me. So when I started with functional health, because I started getting some functional health clients and I was like, I've not a clue what to do with these people. Yeah, those people with gut issues and metabolic syndrome issues and a lot of other different stuff, Hashimoto's, and I was intrigued because I was like, there's something that doesn't fit. This doesn't fit the normal, typical client. And that made me kind of like dive into the functional health stuff. I had my own gut issues, which was down to my diabetes that I ended up finding out, which then made me go down a rabbit hole of learning about the gut. And then when I learned about the gut, I started realizing that the gut is probably one of the most important factors that anyone can look after, to be honest with you, down to its different axes and stuff like that. And that led me to getting different mentors, doing different courses, and then eventually starting to teach this stuff to other different coaches who coach general population, and to help get them in shape and help them have more of an impact, basically. Because I've been pretty full client-wise for about 5 years, so I wanted to have a bigger impact. So me and Ali, who's the other part of AN Education, we came together and we developed a course which has now been running about maybe 3 years. I think it's around about now. So yeah, that's in a nutshell me and why I got into functional health stuff.
So just before we kind of dive into a few obviously different topics, how do you find the kind of a mentoring education side of it over the coaching? Have you got a preference, on which one you kind of like?
So I still do both. So I still have quite a lot of like one-to-one clients. And we have quite a lot of coaches now on the education platform. It's different, yeah. Different in a way of it's cool because I can see my younger self in a lot of the coaches where I was kind of like almost sometimes looking too far down a rabbit hole when I didn't need to. Do you know what I mean? And kind of like thinking stuff is more extreme when really it's more simplistic. But also on the flip side, oversimplifying stuff and missing the kind of more complexities. Yeah. So it's different in a way of like me being a coach is just me being able to see problems straight away now from what data there's tracked. Whereas now it's me kind of going, this is the data in front of you. What do you interpret from this data, so to speak, of what this client has brought to you? And helping coaches just kind of piece that information together. So preference-wise, I'd probably still say I love one-to-one coaching, mate. I'll always do one-to-one coaching. I love coaching. I have a wide range of different clients. I love coaching people. But I equally am starting to love the mentoring side of things. When I see a coach now, they're starting to think a little bit differently. That's always very rewarding as well.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said that regardless of whether it's, kind of a coaching or obviously in your case mentoring, there's some difference when you see somebody from start to kind of a further down the line, and the difference in the progression and how things are obviously going for them. But I'm glad you mentioned one point, because just about the simplistic things of it. just because obviously social media just now, that was one of the first things that I was going to bring up with you. So in terms of obviously kind of our gut issues and stuff like that, I think a lot of people tend to overthink, overanalyze, and ultimately they're the ones that's possibly causing some of their gut issues because of that and because of social media. So if you get somebody that kind of comes to you now, in terms of obviously them presenting themselves with gut issues, obviously saying that they want to change their physique, they might be on the heavier side, they might be relatively lean but not too lean, basically just want to change how their body is. What's your first reaction, and what sort of process have you got there for that?
So first of all, I like everybody filling out like on my consultation or onboarding form, I have a symptoms assessment form, which I think is important to gather what a client is currently experiencing, whether that be digestive issues, blood sugar management issues, whatever it is. And then that just gives me an overview. I don't act upon that straight away because if we create a protocol based around someone's symptoms, that can complicate the issue. Yeah.
Yep.
That's us then going, maybe giving this client a label so then they act upon the label. Yeah. The label could be SIBO or leaky gut or whatever if we go into gut issues, and then they catastrophize the problem, which makes it worse. So the symptoms assessment form is just for me to see what this client's been experiencing, but the basics are what I go into at the start with everyone. So, for example, say if a client is getting bloating every day, all day, right? It's more like, cool, right? Well, that might just be caused by you eating crap all day, every day. Do you know what I mean? So then it's like, if we just pull out the processed food and the alcohol and minimize that and put in more whole foods, good quality foods, regular meal timings, all that type of simple stuff, it might sort itself. Yeah. And then in that first 6 to 12 weeks, it might be like after 3 weeks, they're like, my God, I'm not bloated anymore. Sweet, cool. We solved it really easy. Low hanging fruit is always the first protocol for me. Yeah. Because if that low hanging fruit's then ticked, and then we've got a problem, still a problem occurring, then we might need to dive a little bit deeper and look a little bit more at other different things. But the way that I've come to this is through being the coach who did the protocol from the symptoms assessment form, and then realizing that don't always fucking work, and it's not actually always that complex. Sometimes it's just getting the basics right. And this is what I teach a lot of our mentorship clients or coaches on the mentorship, that it's not always as complex as we think. It's sometimes just the simple shit that is needed, basically.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think if somebody's obviously come and present themselves with certain symptoms, certain issues, if they've not got a proper diagnosis, whether if it was like IBD type and it's Crohn's colitis, they went through scopes, so they've got a proper diagnosis. They're really self-diagnosing themselves, and ultimately, unless we've got anything there to back that up, it could just be the simple stuff. And I think kind of a social media, they now puts out certain things where if you're suffering with XYZ, if you have this symptom XYZ, then it means you have this, and that's putting it into people's head, and then they're running with it, and then obviously ultimately it's causing further issues down the line.
100%. I think labels is the worst thing in our fucking in humanity. Like, if we get labeled something, like, and we're not as educated, and I mean that in not a patronizing way, then, and we don't know much about the label, should we say, the label being, like, for those listening, like maybe PCOS or like a bacterial overgrowth or whatever, we act upon that and we think that we're different, when really it might be just the simple stuff that solves the issue. And let's be honest, like, I'd probably say 9 times out of 10, it is the simple stuff that people aren't doing. They're searching for this magic potion, magic pill, magic formula when it doesn't exist. There's a couple things that we may need to do based around different scenarios or health conditions, but on the whole, the bread and butter, so to speak, is the basics: movement, whole foods, regulating stress, getting good sleep, hydrating. Then we're kind of like the basics of what we need to do. And when we tick all them boxes, Like I said, if we need to go a little bit more complex, then we can do. But the complexity should only last for so long before going back simplistic anyway.
Yep. And in terms of, just as we we're saying with labels and that, what's your opinion on the label of IBS? Because obviously, for a lot of people, they're attached to that label because that's what the doctor tells them. But obviously, there's a lot of people out there on social media saying that IBS isn't real, and that kind of butt hurts a lot of people because they're quite strong on that basically they have IBS and they've had it for years type scenario.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, isn't it, mate? Because I think obviously as IBS, it's kind of like an umbrella bracket of stuff that or could be different issues. Like it could be low stomach acid, it could be leaky gut, it could be bacterial overgrowth, it could be colitis, Crohn's, and be a bit more severe, serious. But I think I don't like the term, I'll be honest, because I think I'd probably have a guess that 80% of people that are labeled with IBS probably just don't have their habits in check. They probably just don't manage the stress. They probably just don't eat enough fruit and veg. They probably just don't hydrate as much. They probably drink alcohol every weekend. They probably eat processed food and takeaways 3-4 times a week. And it's that shit that's causing the IBS, should we say. It's,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I don't like the term. I like whenever, I'll be honest, whenever someone says to me I've got IBS, I'm always like, cool, let's just get your habits in check and let's see if you've still got IBS. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Let's
Yeah.
see, let's get the basic stuff nailed, and then you can tell me whether you've got IBS. I think some people are more prone to like bloating, gas, constipation, loose stools, that type of stuff. I think people are more prone, like gut microbiome wise. But is that from a standpoint of how they've been brought up, what the nutrition was like as a youngster, like going into the teenage years? Is that what's caused that like sensitivity? Do you know what I mean? Or is it just that the habits are rubbish at the moment and they have been for a while? So I think like I don't want to say that if anyone's listening to this and you have been like you have been told that you've got IBS, I'm not saying that you don't have. I'm not saying that you're just rubbish and you don't do what you need to. You may be more prone to these issues. Like you may have a lower gluten tolerance, a lower dairy tolerance than like I may have. Yeah. But you still will run under the same bracket of if you tidy up your habits, then you'll probably see at least some improvement within them symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it's one of the ones where we've got to be empathetic with these people, and reason with them. But we obviously need to, as you say, look at the basics and find out exactly what it is. Because again, we live in a world where it's abundance, and sometimes it's not necessarily certain foods or food groups that's irritating them. It's the amount of them that they're consuming. Because for example, a lot of people say they can't eat fruit and veg. I know I'm certainly somebody that struggles with that type of thing because of my IBD.
Mm-hmm.
However, a lot of the times it's because these people are trying to eat in excess of what their body can handle, and if that was brought down, they'll actually soon realise that they can actually tolerate it, or for most people anyway.
I think sometimes as well, mate, like if you act upon a label, you give power to the label and you don't give the power to yourself, which I think is a big thing. Because if you are confident that you can solve said issue by doing said thing, then that gives you more power over your own life as opposed to giving it to something else and going, this has control over me. I don't control it. And I know that's maybe a little bit deep, but I think that's a big part of it because I think a lot of like mindset stuff comes into this as well with someone's ability to actually do what is needed to actually solve the issue. Because I think that's a lot of people's problems these days as well. It's having the, let's say, motivation, yeah, to do it, so to speak. And that does come from your own internal like self-belief of giving power to other things, not taking control and going, no, I can do this, so to speak. I know that was a little bit off topic, like, but I think it's important.
No, I totally agree. I think, the more I've learned about these things, mindset's a big factor, because again, that's going to be the whole stress and anxiety component of it as well, which plays a massive factor. I think it's one of the factors that a lot of people don't actually take into account and just think it's a bit woo-woo, which years ago I would have thought the same, but now that I've learned more and basically went right into the arse of most things, you start to learn that, it is actually true and accurate, and there is a part of that. So just moving kind of forward a wee bit. So I take it, that once you've done the consultation type stuff, the first main sort of things that you're maybe going to overhaul or look at and look to see what to do is mainly kind of once people start to get the basics, but it would be more on maybe their nutrition, their training. In terms of the kind of we'll come back to nutrition, but just on the training part, do you ever see the need that you need to pull people back? Because sometimes obviously you get Gen Pop coming and they think they need to go to the gym every day or 6 times a week and they're hammering themselves. Then you get people who's maybe coaches or that, and they're maybe going the right amount of times, but they're just putting that bit too much and their body's maybe struggling to deal with it. So do you ever find that you need to kind of pull people back in times when they're having gut issues to try and see if it calms things?
Yes, depending on the person. So, like, if we take the person you kind of just described, where they train too much. They basically think that they need to train 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. 1,000,000%. Yeah. Because to get the most out of someone, like, less is more for them type of people, because all they're doing is potentially damaging the gut more if they've got damage there, because the cortisol is going to be higher. But also they're going to fry the nervous system that's already pretty dysregulated if they've got some form of gut issue. Yeah.
Yep.
So for them type of people, and you'll always find, well, no, not always, but sometimes you'll find that them type of people do end up with gut issues just because of the overtrain. And that's the cause of the gut issue. Yeah.
Yep.
So with them type of people, 1,000,000%, it's less is more, and trying to get them to eat more calories that they can digest so the body can recover. But then in another aspect where, say, if we've got like a general population client who can't really train, probably not. Do you know what I mean? We probably just want to make sure they're still going to the gym, enjoying it, and doing the amount of volume or training that they need to do based around the goal that they want to achieve. So I'd probably say the first type that we described of the overtrainer, you'll probably find that that's someone normally who's trained for quite a while and can train. Or like a coach, for an example, who loves training. They do it for the mental health. They feel like that they need to sometimes burn off calories and stuff like that. Then 100%. And then the other type of client, which would be the just like average general population who just goes training because either they feel like they have to or they want to. And we'd probably just keep them the same with training and solve other issues, if there is any.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. As I said, it's just one of the things where I sometimes think you get a bit of pushback when you try to bring somebody down because they're not wanting to do it.
Always.
And obviously, you can ever hear a few people saying, when gut issues are present, you shouldn't be in the gym, which I don't necessarily believe that, because I think you need to, activity and pushing on is only going to help somebody as well, because again, if we're sitting about doing nothing, then that's not really going to help the gut process either.
Yeah, I mean, like I think there's studies to show, one springs to mind, I can't remember like the pool or anything like that, but they found that actually resistance training regulates the gut microbiome. So if we actually resistance train, it can actually improve our gut microbiome. So we want to keep resistance training in the, no matter what issues are going on, really, apart from if there's like injury or whatever. But definitely, if we're speaking specifically about gut issues, which we are, then weight training, maybe a little bit of cardio, like 100% all the time. I would definitely not pull any of that out.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm.
And in terms of obviously just coming back round to the kind of a nutrition side of it, obviously I think we'll both agree on that we're trying to reduce as much kind of a crap in diets and and make sure it's proper kind of a whole foods, etc. But is there any type of food or that you have seen that you like to add in that maybe people don't really have, or is there certain foods that you think should come out for a period of time just to try and kind of get things balanced?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a person or a coach who likes getting a client to track the digestion on a daily basis, first of all. Yeah, how many stools they pass and whether they get any digestive issues on a daily basis, so we can see and what time of day maybe that digestive issue is happening. So then we can kind of relate this to maybe the nutrition and see whether there is any nutritional things causing issues, right? Like something that I briefly touched on is like everyone will have their own gluten and dairy tolerance that's inter-individual, like biologically, right? So,
Yep.
like for example, I could probably tolerate more than you on both, or may be able to. You may be able to tolerate more than me. So, I like reducing gluten and dairy for a little bit of time if there's gut issues present, because I feel like, for me personally, from what I've seen anecdotally, that them are the two that like stir up a little bit in the gut. Yeah. Because normally, if we look at general population, they'll eat more gluten and dairy and less like fibrous, like vegetables and fruit. And I'd probably say for 90% of people, they need more of a different balance of more fruit and veg and lower amount of gluten and dairy. Not completely eradicate it, but just pull it down until the client is more asymptomatic, to then kind of reintroduce more in there, like because the gut will change where it will be able to tolerate some more if there is like an imbalance in bacteria, etc. With like certain foods, like I do like going more towards like carbohydrate sources from the likes of like potatoes and the likes of like gluten-free oats, or even a little bit of oats that aren't gluten-free, and the likes of sourdough bread for like carb sources. I kind of like them as like staples for people. Not saying that I say not none of the other stuff. I just feel like they're easier to break down and digest for 90% of people, I would say. Um, and I do like telling clients to add in rocket and radish on a daily basis for like bitter vegetables, stimulating pancreatic enzyme production. That's normally kind of the basics of it. Like you'll probably find with me that it's improvised sometimes. They're like my general rules, should we say? But
Yep.
it's improvised based around the client, based around what's causing an intolerance, or is there any food causing an intolerance, or is it just that you're highly stressed all the time? Yeah.
Yep.
So them are kind of like general rules of thumb, but yeah.
And where are you at with kind of a fats within the diet? You kind of somebody that likes to have them on the lower end, on the higher end? Do you kind of delve into that with the client and find out historically if they always, if they had issues? Because obviously we know if a lot of people have had the gallbladder out, but they're never told that when that comes out, that can cause them digestive issues themselves. Because again, the doctors never seem to really tell people that.
Yeah. So with fats, obviously on the symptoms assessment or onboarding form, there will be I think there's an option of like gallbladder removed. So if they take that, then I'll go more on the lower end of fats, 100%. As like a general rule of thumb, should we say, I normally like clients having around about, if they're dieting, like a minimum of 0.7 to 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight. So that's what I normally kind of like. And then fat sources coming more from like poly and monounsaturated fats as opposed to like saturated, obviously not trans fats, but I will put a little bit of saturated fats in the diet, but I like going more to the likes of like olive oil, avocado, some little bits of dark chocolate, depending, um, based around like fat intake.
And when it comes to kind of a fruit and veg, do you have certain ones that you see in practice, better digestion wise for certain or for people with gut issues, or do you try and just get an array of them, but maybe just limit the amount in a serving?
Yeah, so if someone's got gut issues, it will be well, dependent on the size of the individual. To be honest with you, dependent on the calorie intake, I go more towards like the likes of like berries, yeah, and the likes of I don't want to say low FODMAP fruit. I do go more towards berries and mainly the likes of melon, like honeydew melon for people with gut issues. But the amounts do matter, as you know. I'll probably err on the side of caution and go like maybe 50, 75 grams. And then if they can push up from that, if they can tolerate that, then I'll push them up. But I with like the clients that come to me, I find that normally if the issue's coming from a fruit, it's normally maybe a histamine issue over
Yep,
anything, to be honest with you. You probably find that yourself, Sean.
yep,
So it's probably limiting the amount of histamine in the diet, but still trying to get some fruits in there that maybe have a little bit of histamine in, because we know like raspberries do, for an example, because of the antioxidant profile in them, but without causing some form of mast cell activation, etc.
yeah. Just as you're saying with that, I think one of the frustrating things now is that you could have somebody where the digestion's pretty decent, everything's going well, then all of a sudden it starts going the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you start to poke into it, you then find that because social media told them they're adding sauerkraut, kimchi, and
Yeah,
then you find out that that's what the problem's been, and they've added that in themselves. But sometimes the client doesn't realise that, so they don't tell you that at the start. It's not until you start actually looking into it and saying, right, what have you added in, then they come clean and say to you. And they've not said it at the start because they didn't realise it was going to be a problem, because everybody's on
yeah,
that bandwagon of that type of food at the moment.
yeah, 100%, mate. That is a common thing that happens quite a lot, and it's mainly due to, like we just said, the histamine in the probiotic based food, and histamine is kind of like I'd probably say an some a factor that a lot of people don't know about,
Yep,
that they don't realize as well, and rightly so. Like general population aren't going to know much about histamine, and like it's our job as a coach to not. So like if you give a client too much information, then it kind of like paralyzes them. So sometimes they have to make that mistake. Do you know what I mean? Because
yep,
it's, as a coach, it's not, for me anyway, I'm not like, right, watch this because of this, and then this because of this, and this because of this. Because then a client goes, fucking hell, like, what, I'm watching all this stuff. I'm like, let's just follow by these rules. Like, there's not too many. Yeah.
yep,
See how we go. Let's gather some data. And then if the problems are still occurring, then cool. We'll keep diving into this and we'll keep digging a bit deeper. So I think that you're completely correct with what you say. Like obviously probiotic based foods are brilliant for gut health, but only when they're brilliant for gut health, if
yeah,
that makes sense.
yep. Only if you can actually tolerate them.
Yeah, exactly.
And in terms of, is there, a certain list of supplements that you like to have people on, or do you just have supplements in depending on how the person's feeling, what sort of phase are they in, if they're dieting or if they're trying to put more food in to support them, what's your thoughts with that?
So I've gone a little bit full circle on supplements. Like where probably if you asked me this question 2, 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I'd have probably give you, well, these supplements for this and these for this. And now I'm kind of like, well, I like people taking magnesium, glycinate, preferably. Zinc L-carnosine, I think it's good for gut barrier integrity, stomach acid production. I don't think it'd do anyone any harm taking 30 milligrams a day for the rest of their life.
Yep.
Some form of B vitamin. Yeah, we probably deplete a lot of B vitamins through stress and a few other bits. Some form of omega-3 or omega-3 fish oil or cod liver oil from Carlson Labs or something like that. And then maybe a creatine. If they've got gut issues and creatine doesn't agree with them, I'll pull that out. But them are the 5 that I like people taking year round if they can do. Yeah.
Yep.
When someone is like dieting, like if the kind of maybe getting some form of constipation, then I like using ginger root extract.
Yep.
So ginger root extract, about 250 milligram before each meal, just maybe back end of dieting. If they're pretty lean and like cortisol's higher, they're peeing loads, they're dehydrating themselves, causing constipation, because it's normally just a stress element that's causing that. So that can just give a little bit of help with the constipation aspect. But you'll normally know yourself, mate, like when someone's dieting and they're getting pretty lean, because they've got all the habits in check, it won't be some form of processed food alcohol. So they'll normally probably not get like loose stools or if like upper abdominal bloating comes in or some form of bloating, it's probably from either eating too quick, putting too many meals close together, or being too stressed and having too much stress based around the dieting and external stress coming. So normally it's an easy fix. Do you know what I mean? Because it's kind of like, well, it's normally one of them 3 things. So them 3 things are pretty easy to solve because it's no supplement's going to solve them. It's more our way of coaching them that solves them. So with dieting, that's what I do. Like I normally like giving people L-citrulline malate as well, just for energy production if they're struggling or flagging around the sessions. But that's kind of like maybe supplementation. I don't mind if clients can afford to have colostrum, the back end of a diet. Brilliant, get it in there because there's probably there may be a little bit of gut barrier integrity like damage, so to speak, just from the sheer stress of dieting. Do you know what I mean? So it's not going to do anyone any harm. Then with like gaining muscle tissue, same 5 supplements that I said, magnesium, zinc, them type of stuff, and maybe including maybe a digestive enzyme when calories get so high, maybe. But apart from that, mate, nothing too serious on supplements. What about yourself?
No, yeah, I like that approach. I like to try and keep everything simple and basic. Especially depends on what sort of gut issue that we're dealing with. If it's just a general one, or if it comes in a case of where it's kind of an autoimmune. Because again, obviously, some of the supplements react with the autoimmune, which is then I like to look at kind of our blood work then and see where
Yeah, of
some of these
course.
levels are. Because obviously, some of the autoimmune, we kind of I know historically, they're probably going to be lower in vitamin D and stuff like that. So they're worthwhile adding in. Although I do like that you never mentioned glutamine, which is heavily touted, especially for a lot of gut issues. But again, I think that actually reacts and causes a lot more gut issues when people put that in rather than helps. I think if you have a normal healthy gut and you're stable, then glutamine's kind of a great and it can help. But I think as soon as you run into gut issues, I tend to see more times than not that the gut reacts to that. I don't know if that's something that you see as well.
I think I agree with you. If somebody has some form of like damage to gut lining and it's like more chronic than acute, then I'll see, because the good thing about glutamine is it's pretty cheap
Yep.
and people can afford it. So I will try that with someone who has chronic kind of chronic, like maybe leaky gut, intestinal permeability, and see how they react to it. And if they don't react well, then I'll go to colostrum. I think colostrum's probably the miles better one. It's just a lot more expensive than glutamine. So
Yeah.
again, I'll kind of assess the client's financial situation and say like, well, we can try this, but it may not work, and it may make things a little bit worse. But if it's fine, cool, keep it in there. Yeah, and just do like 10 grams a day. Yeah. I have had like clients though who've had colitis, and I've seen that up to 20 grams of L-glutamine a day has actually helped them. So
Yep.
I think it depends on the individual, to be honest with you. I'm not quite too sure what the mechanism behind that is, though, mate, if I'm completely honest. I think it might just be about a person's like interindividuality, to be honest with you.
There is a mechanism though. If I'm honest, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I heard Austin Stout mention it before. So there's definitely something that if you react to glutamine, there's something happening in the body. I just can't remember it off the top of my head exactly what the mechanism is, but it is there. But obviously, colostrum's the kind of a heavy hitter there. But again, as you said, it is obviously more expensive. But again, it just depends on how bad things are that that'll obviously move the needle for them. But in terms of the other supplementation you mentioned there, I do think it is better to err on the side of caution, especially I think you get a lot of people trying to fling like beta and HCl and stuff like that. And again, these supplements are great when it's required,
Of
but when it's
course.
not required, it makes the person worse. And I think a lot of people then don't report back because they're not going to. I think sometimes, like when you tell somebody to take something, if you're not edging them to come out and tell you if it's improving or not, then they'll stay quiet about that and just
Of
give you the
course.
symptoms, but won't tell you that it's since they put in this supplement that's happened, so that you can actually kind of figure out that that's the reason behind it, because you've told them to take that, so they automatically then think that that's fine, even though it's a kind of a trial and error thing.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
So in terms of kind of getting a wee bit more into things, obviously I know you're residing in Dubai now, but obviously you kind of you're back and forth to the UK and that. And one thing that I don't hear much of in the UK compared to the US is things like GI maps, etc.
Mm.
Is that stuff that you tend to do, or do you tend to try and not do the type of things? Obviously because of cost, because again we know it does come down to cost.
Mm. That's my last resort. So I'll first thing is let's just tidy your habits up and let's see if we can get you asymptomatic from doing that and getting you doing the basics. If then we can't, then it's like, right, get some bloods done. Let's have a look at your bloods and let's see if we can see what the problem is from blood work. I'd probably say 99 times out of 100 bloods can solve any issue, in my opinion.
I
If
would agree.
then there is a further issue where I'm like, right, bloods are saying that this is all cool, but you're still getting these issues, and I believe you're being adherent, then I'd be like, then let's get a GI map and let's see what's going on. Yeah.
Yep.
Mate, I've probably had 5 clients get GI maps because it's my literally last resort, and that's over like the last 6 years. It's literally my last resort. They're really good, but equally they cost a lot, and you'd have to do bloods before a GI map because that's how I do things. So that's even more money on top of thingy. So, and I think that we can get as much as what we need to just from bloods. But I've had clients who's done a GI map and his bloods look fine, and then the GI map told us loads. So there is certain specific scenarios that will require a GI map, yeah, and require like a pretty specific complex protocol. And they do come
Yeah.
around, but mate, like I've had one and I've coached thousands of people. So it's kind of like, it's one in thousands that probably need that, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree. The only reason I was asking is I just think that they're not spoken enough of in the UK, because I do think some people could be doing with them. But as you say, I know bloods is an option, and I totally agree with that. I think we can see quite a lot in the bloods. I think one of the main things is I think that the bloods are fine for most issues, but when we start to encroach into some of the autoimmune type cases, I think that's when the GI map can be handy then. I mean, I got my own done because my bloods looked fine. I got the GI map, and then that's when I was able to see obviously the commensals and basically, Akkermansia was tanked rock bottom, but I wouldn't have knew that without the GI map. But again, it's just something that the UK doesn't really do. But again, in flip side of that, I think in the US, it's as soon as you present with an issue, it's we need a GI map to see what's under
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Instead of getting the kind of a bloods done.
Yeah, I think. Well, funnily enough, mate, I had my own GI map done recently as well. Um, Mine was down to a skin issue that I thought was coming from my gut, and then the GI map come and it wasn't coming from my gut,
Yeah,
which was
that's
which was which was really really surprising because I was like, this has got to be some form of like parasite or something like that. And it
yep,
came back. I had like slightly elevated H. pylori, so I had
yep.
tiny bit tiny bit elevated H. pylori. E. coli was a little bit low, but apart from that, mate, I was like my gut map was 90% cool.
Wow.
So then it was like, right, cool. It's not coming from my gut, which is a good thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like fucking
Yeah,
thank God. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
It rules it out for you, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So gut maps are good for them type of cases as well. Like 1,000,000%. If you feel like you were on the side of, like you say, autoimmune or some form of GI issue that you're not solving and you're doing things by the book, should we say, or 90% right, then it's definitely an option that you should be thinking about at least.
yeah. No, I totally agree. As you say, but from what you said at the start, though, I think you know start with the basics and then work your way along. I think some people just overly complicate everything and try to jump to the end rather than starting at the start and working their way. And I think obviously in the UK we're kind of quite good here that we've got quite a few decent blood places that we can get done privately, which yeah, there's a cost to them, but they're probably not as high as that you would imagine because obviously there's certain markers that we can mark that we're looking for because there's other markers that maybe not going to tell us too much. Um, is there certain markers that you like to look at within the bloods that tell you stuff or
Yeah, so I'll obviously like the white blood cells are our immune system, and 75% of that's in our gut. So we've got to take note of them and what they're saying. Yeah.
yep,
And then obviously looking further down bloods, you can imagine the list in my head now. It's looking for like more nutrient deficiency type stuff for a lot of people, and
yep,
maybe some form of inflammation markers as well. So nutrient deficiencies could be like your MCV, MCH, MCHC, even hemoglobin, iron, vitamin D, ALP, them type of markers to look more nutrient, even hormonal panel like obviously thyroid and testosterone, even estrogen, and then looking more at like maybe a little bit of inflammation markers, so like CRP, iron, ferritin, these type of markers to see whether there is some inflammation going on as well. And then kind of like linking these together along with like a symptoms assessment form to see whether these things marry up and paint a picture for us. So then we can kind of like interpret that in a way where we've got two forms of data. And I'll be honest, symptoms assessment form aren't always 100% accurate dependent on the person. It does depend
yep,
on, like, say if you've got a person who, I always like saying with the symptoms assessment form, just tick symptoms that you've had in the past month. Yeah. Not
yeah,
like 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because some
yeah,
people kind of start looking at symptoms assessment and go, I'm sure I had that or I've had that before. And they tick everything. And you're like, well, that's not even useful to us anymore.
yeah,
So that's the problem with the symptoms assessment that can occur. But if the client, you kind of set rules, should we say, like just make sure it's in the last month and be
yep,
honest with it. Don't overthink things. Just if you've got that, that's cool. And then marrying that up with the bloods, and then just like I said, painting a picture. Is there any kind of markers pointing towards some permeability, some form of bacterial overgrowth? Maybe even can we tell parasites from bloods? There's people say yeah, people say no, but we probably can more from symptoms marry with bloods. That'd probably paint the picture there for us.
yeah. I mean, I think one of the other things obviously we can see for the bloods as well is the kind of pancreatic enzymes. Are they going to need them because is that low? Because again, that's a kind of a low hanging fruit where it might not be necessarily stomach acid related. They just might not have the proper enzymes to be able to digest the food.
Hundred
And then
percent,
also we can support that.
100%, mate.
But no, thanks very much for coming on. Nathan. That was
Good.
brilliant. Um, I know obviously you've got the education, you've got the coaching of that. So if you want to put your kind of a plug in, let people know where they can find you, reach out to you, ask you anything that if they've heard anything that triggers their brain that they want to reach out and ask you any sort of a questions.
Yeah, mate. So you can find me at my Instagram is Nathan underscore AN coaching. So that's my main page. That's my one-to-one coaching page. You can ask me any questions on that and just DM me. That's cool. And then if you're a coach and you want to look more towards the education side of things, then you can follow AN Education 23, and that's me and Ali, my business partner, should we say, who's a coach as well. And we run a mentorship. I don't know when this is going to go out, but our next mentorship intake starts on week commencing the 10th of August. So have a look at that. If you want to kind of ask me any questions about that, then feel free to DM that page and just absorb some of our content and see whether you feel like you want to learn from us, and that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's great, mate. The episode will be out before then, so if there's
Cool,
anybody
amazing.
watching, you'll be able to reach out about that. I know personally, I attended a seminar that obviously that you guys done. I learned quite a bit from it. I know you are quite big on kind of getting people supported and doing these type of events. So I know certainly I'll attend one of them in the future again as well.
Yeah, mate, I think it's important. Like, we don't have as much in-person education stuff these days. I think it's important to have in-person education so we can interact, we can get to know people more, you can network with other different coaches, and you can equally learn some cool stuff that you can potentially apply to your clients. So yeah, it was a brilliant seminar, that one as well.
Yeah, no, I think the networking aspect of it is quite big because, you know, not to bash on any coaches, but there's a lot of coaches out there that are just out for themselves and want to walk over people instead of just. But we're all here to kind of help each other and get on with stuff. If you're
100%.
if you're if you're truly in it to coach and to help people, then you should just really be supporting everybody. You know, that's the way to go.
100%, mate. And I think a lot of coaches, or some coaches, probably need to think about investing in themselves a bit more as well.
Yep.
Going out there, investing in themselves, learning more from people who've been in the game a little bit longer than them and maybe know that little bit more than them, and upskilling themselves so you can give your clients a better service. That's who pays your bills, in it. So we need to actually give back to our clients by improving ourselves.
Yeah, it's like the old thought where there's always somebody out there who's bigger and better and knows more than you. So
Always.
the more you learn, the better that obviously that you can get. Not just for your clients, but for yourself as well. So that, it becomes you more confident the more that you know and knowledge.
100%, mate. Like, I think the biggest thing that coaches suffer with these days is imposter syndrome, where
Yep.
they feel like an imposter, and I was one of them. That's the reason, one of the main reasons why I started learning more for the past 10 years. So if you are struggling with imposter syndrome, it tells me that you need improve your knowledge, you need work on yourself, build your confidence as a coach, and become less of an imposter in your own head, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Well, Nathan, thanks very much for coming on. That was a brilliant episode, mate. Thank you very much.
Anytime, mate. Thank you for having me on, bud.